Hey now, coming to you on Wednesday, April 8th. And today's a big day. Today is a big day because we're going to be talking about an event that is really pretty interesting and definitely changed the way television was produced and made uh, to the point where I would say today's TV has more uh, to do with. I'll put it to you this way. Before this event that we're going to learn about today, there was television, and then everything changed because of this event. It's also a big day because I'm going to wear pants. I'm going to wear pants for the first time in 4 weeks. Not to alarm any of you, I've been wearing some sort of covering on my lower body. So I've got I've got stuff on, but as far as like traditional pants, this will be the first time in 4 weeks, so it's a big day. I'm pretty excited. I'm gonna go fishing and have to put on some pants. So yeah. Anywho, we talked yesterday about early TV programming, and the thing is that everything was first run. They had to create everything from scratch, and so you think about all the different programs that are on TV today. Well, they've been doing them for decades now, so they got it down to a science. But at the beginning of this, in the 1950s, everything was first run and completely, uh, you know, brand new, and it made for some terrible television. For example, some early news programs. Today, if something happens in the world, they have video of it. 20, 30 years ago, if something happened in the world and they didn't have video of it, if it was an explosion or a fire or an earthquake, they had what was called stock footage where they could show you what that looked like. In the 50s, everything was brand new. So they literally, this is nuts, but there are some examples of, oh, they're talking about a house fire and they would have like a cartoon drawing of a house on fire. Or somebody would make a cardboard house and set it on fire. Like that's how bad it was. Um, so my point is that they were always searching for something new to put on, and they did have sitcoms and dramas and other things, but the go to program for all three networks in the 50s at least were quiz shows, and there's a reason for that. And I'm talking about not just quiz shows, but big money quiz shows. Today, a show like Jeopardy is nice, but the most you ever win is usually in measured in the tens of thousands of dollars. And the shows I'm talking about in the 50s, like for example, the $64,000 question was the number one show in 1954, and $64,000 in 1954 was the equivalent of over $250,000 today. That's a huge amount of money. It's the kind of money that can change your life. Just to give you an idea how popular these shows were, like I said, the number one show in 1954 was the $64,000 question. And then in 1957 alone, there were 22 quiz shows on TV, and that's on only three networks that only broadcast between the hours of, let's say, 7 a.m. and 12 midnight. There were 22 quiz shows on, and there's a reason for that. One, they were super cheap to make. You need a set that never changes. You need a host. You need questions, but that's pretty much it. Everybody else is not an actor, so you're not paying them actors' wages, and they might not even win anything. So there's all you're really out is the amount of money it takes to produce the show and whatever you're paying your host. So tremendously cheap to make. Advertisers loved it because they could display their names throughout the entire program. And I'll show you some examples of this probably tomorrow. But you take a show like 21, which is a show we're going to talk about a ton. So they would have the set for the show, and then on the podium that the announcer or the host spoke from, it had Geritol's corporate logo, and then there was a big sign hanging above the set that said Geritol, and then they would do a commercial for Geritol before the show started, and then in the middle of the show they'd take a break and do one. So for that company, Geritol, um, whatever money they paid, it was a constant ad for their product throughout the entire show. Contestants loved them because you're going to win more money than you would see in a lifetime. the public love to watch these things because we love to watch people win, but sometimes we like to watch people lose even more. So that was fun. And there was another problem with all these shows, and that is almost every one of them was rigged. And why? Why would you rig a stupid quiz show? Well, the sponsors, they wanted drama. They wanted people to tune in. They wanted excitement. They wanted, you know, contestants people wanted to root for and watch win, and villains, contestants that people hated and wanted to root against, and they wanted ties and cliffhangers. And the only way to really guarantee any of that stuff is to rig it. So, for example, I keep mentioning the show 21. 21 was a quiz show where you had two contestants sitting in soundproof booths, and they would have a choice of questions between 1 point and I think 8 points. And neither one would know what questions the other had gotten right or wrong, or how many points they had. At different points during the show, the host would ask them if they wanted to stop, and if they quit and they were ahead, they would win automatically. And there was all this stuff going on, and they were trying to get to 21 first. Well, there's all those variables, and the pilot episode, the first episode they ever shot of the show 21, ended in a 0-0 tie. And Geritol, the sponsor, said, "We're not going to give you another nickel for this show until you can make this compelling. We want to make this exciting for people." And so, right from that moment, they decided we have to rig this thing so we get the outcomes we want. The thing is, the American public had no idea about that. And it wasn't just 21 that was rigged, it was pretty much all the big money game shows were all rigged and nobody knew anything about it. There's going to be a couple of smoking guns for this. One of them is this show 21. There's a contestant on the show named Herb Stempel that we're going to learn a lot more about in the next 2 days, who was the reigning champ and at the time had won more money than anybody on TV. And he ends up getting beat by this guy here, Charles Van Doren. Charles Van Doren was from a famous family. He was a professor at Columbia, an Ivy League school. So was his dad. His mom was a well-known author. His uncle was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and poet. So everybody knew the name Van Doren at that time in the 50s, the same way people knew the name, um, what's his name? I can't remember it now. Stephen Hawking. And why did we know the name Stephen Hawking? Because he was brilliant, and that's what they were known for. So Van Doren ends up getting on the show, and he ends up beating Stempel, and we'll talk about how that all went down. And he ends up becoming the most famous person on TV. He's on the cover of TV Guide, like you see here. He's on the cover of Life magazine and Time magazine. He's doing guest spots on the Tonight Show and the Today Show, and he gets super famous. And Stempel, the man he beat the whole time that this is going on, is getting more bitter and bitter about it because he knew what nobody else did, which was that this was all rigged. And so he ends up blowing the whistle on the whole thing, and going to the district attorney in New York City, and basically ratting on everybody and telling them how this was all rigged. And there's a couple other shows that get caught up in this too. So they bring all these contestants in to testify in front of the grand jury, and they all lie. Even Van Doren was called in, and under oath, he was asked, "Is this show rigged?" And he said, "Absolutely not at all. This guy's a liar." And everybody lied. Well, eventually, this goes to Congress, and this is during the McCarthy era. So, if you remember when we talked about payola and how the McCarthy hearings called in all the DJs and the record producers. Well, they did this for everybody. They called in movie producers and comic book illustrators and writers and actors and musicians, and they called in these TV people too. And when they were in Washington D.C. under oath in front of Congress, this is when everybody decided to finally tell the truth. And so it was proved that these were rigged, and it was this huge scandal. And these big game shows, these big money quiz shows that were the most popular thing on TV were gone and didn't come back until the 2000s with shows like, I can't even remember some of those shows. What's the one with the cases in it? The briefcases, whatever that was. And then Deal or No Deal, and Weakest Link, and shows like that where you could win a bunch of money. But they were gone. They disappeared for like 60 years. So here is the end result of the quiz show scandal. One, that single sponsorship of TV shows ended. Companies like Geritol and you know, Colgate, that had all this power because of all the money they were spending. Um, that was not a good thing, because it was Geritol that forced the show 21 to end up rigging its results. And so the networks forced out single sponsors by making it too expensive for them. And then we went to our traditional commercial block like we're used to today. So if you hate commercials, blame Geritol, I guess. And the other big thing was that people stopped trusting everything they saw on television. There's this idea that we couldn't trust it, the same way that people stopped really trusting the radio after the War of the Worlds broadcast. This did that for TV. People were like, why should I believe anything I see when you guys lied to us about this? But that was a long, long time ago. I mean, that was 70 years ago, and we've forgotten about it. Most of you probably never even heard of this. And so we talked about this with the War of the Worlds broadcast, and I feel like we're kind of ripe for the picking right now when it comes to being fooled by something on TV. Um, and if we were in class, I'd give you a worksheet about this, and we would have these discussions about. One of the questions I ask is it important for you to trust what you see on TV? And most people say no, they don't care. They're just, they're watching TV to be entertained. I guess my answer would be it depends on what it is. If it's the news or something I expect to be true and not at all, um, you know, fabricated or fairy tales. I want it to be real. If it's sports, I want it to be real. If I found out that somehow the NFL was rigged, I would be devastated. Although when you think about it, as a Cleveland Browns fan, I don't know any other explanation for how terrible they've been the last 30 years other than it is rigged, but I don't know. That's just me. Um, Anyway, so that's the beginning of this discussion on the quiz show scandals. Tomorrow, I'm going to introduce you to the actual players in this. You're going to meet Herb Stempel and Charles Van Doren. I'm going to link a clip of the show when it was on in the 50s, and I'm going to have you watch a little bit of it just to see what it was like and to see if you can tell that they're acting and that the thing is rigged. And then I'm going to link a clip to Herb Stempel, who is alive today, still bitter. If you could get a hold of Herb Stempel today and call him up on the phone, he would spend the whole time telling you how he got screwed in 1956 and that this isn't fair. He's still very, very bitter about the whole thing. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, like I said, we'll continue this discussion and get to meet some of these characters, and we'll kind of try and get to the bottom of this together. Peace out. Hope to catch a bunch of fish. I'll let you know tomorrow how I did. But you guys have a great rest of your day.